folks that are with us.
I'm going to turn the radio off, kind of like telling her to turn the cell phone off. As you guys, my name's Kevin Walsh, W8KHW. I'm with my group here in Columbus, or Central Ohio, Central Ohio Digital Interconnect Group. We've got 13 repeaters on the air. Most of them can be interconnected if need be at times. To try to introduce a couple of the other people from the group, this is Andy Whitaker, K8ARW, Scott Gamble, thanks, Hey You Text, W5BSG, Tom, K8ZNY was here, I don't know where he went. Mike helps out with the group back there, NXYM, great resource. So without further ado, we're going to kind of keep this pretty basic, but if you have questions or if something hit something that you don't understand, by all means, interrupt us and let's see if we can help answer your questions. So why exactly is digital important, or what are the advantages? The biggest thing is it's a more efficient use of the radio spectrum. We can get more frequencies, more repeaters, more activity in a single given space. It doesn't take as much bandwidth in terms of the actual operation. So it takes less bandwidth than audio. The signal quality is generally better, even at the same signal strength or the lower signal strength. You'll get about 15% more coverage with a digital repeater than you will with an analog repeater. So you've got the ability to provide greater coverage by connecting the systems together as well. They are all connected. Fortunately, as people will try to always say, is that they're connected via the internet, and everybody knows when the zombie apocalypse comes, the internet's going to go down. Because of the fact that you're linking those repeaters in a digital mode and a digital format means that there's no loss of quality in terms of the audio and in terms of the signal strength. The big thing that I see out of it is better battery life. You can literally have, I carry this radio with me virtually all the time. It's about the size of a cell phone. I could charge this thing and leave it on and walk around with it for 2 or 3 days and not have to worry about it dropping in a charger at night. So it's significantly better. DMR is an open digital standard. It was started, it's an ETSI formulated protocol, so anybody can sign up, any organization can sign up and produce radios to do that. It's not proprietary to one single vendor. As a matter of fact, DMR has more vendors associated with it than any other radio format, period, other than analog. It's 12.5 kilocycles wide bandwidth. It supports 2 time slots in that, which we'll get into in just a minute. Well, it actually says that. It uses the same DVSI AMBE vocoder that all the digital radios use. D-Star, P25, Next Edge, they all use the same chip. I think it's interesting that in the early days of D-Star, people were very upset about the fact that it used a proprietary codec, and yet that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. People have finally relaxed, and it's like the chip's $15 in single piece quantity, so it's not like, it's a lot of money. TDMA or DMR supports 2 time slots. That meets the FCC 6.25 kilocycle wide spacing if they decide to go forward with that. There's some question as to whether or not the FCC will mandate that anymore. But it was first published in 2005. They called that the Tier 1 DMR. It was pretty much short range, and radios could support conventional trunking, but in terms of DMR, they didn't even support networking. Tier 2 radios came out. They were licensed at higher profile as far as the FCC was concerned in commercial business, and the big thing was that you could connect the repeaters together. That's when the networking came in. Tier 3 exists today, and that is full digital area-wide trunking. It's cross country, cross state, cross wherever. It's a fairly low complexity in terms of, so you can buy a high terror radio, you can buy a TYT radio, you can buy a Motorola radio, they all work. It's great. The DMR Association claims better performance than analog FM. It's for two reasons. Part of it is they have a very high forward error correction rate. It actually sends packets for the next block of speech ahead of time, so that if it's missing part of it in the next part of the sentence, it can fill in the blanks. So it's pretty efficient, and you get a very high quality voice with a high signal strength. Each radio has an ID that must be registered to the call sign of the user. This is amateur radio related more than it is commercial radio. But there is a website hosted by DMR Mark. DMR Mark is probably it's a very prolific network system. Their focus and their claim to fame was they wanted to build a very, very stable network with core talk groups. And they've pretty much achieved that. The big thing was that they took the initiative to start creating an ID scheme and a numbering scheme, and luckily everybody got on board with that, and everybody has been using that. And fortunately there may be some deviations from that as little bit as DMR is growing so quickly now, but for the most part that's true. So you buy a radio, you get an ID, you do not need an individual ID for every single radio that you own. Two radios, if you have two radios on at the same time, each of those radios would have to have separate IDs in order to work. But traditionally that's not happening. They'll allow, without question, two IDs to you, so you could have two portables or a portable and a mobile, and as long as you put the different IDs in them, I can live with two IDs. It, does take some pre-planning and some thinking, but it can happen. Internet linking, like other systems, the internet's required. One of the things that we do in Central Ohio is I go to all these Homeland Security and county and state EMA meetings, and I constantly hear them say, and every time you go for a drill, the very first line of every drill is, the internet went down. Now, being a network engineer and working in that field for 25 years, I can tell you the internet can't go down. There may be a spot or local outage. So what we've done, all of our repeater sites are actually have their own private wireless backbone between them. So even if the internet goes down, we don't care. We're going to keep our repeaters up, and we're going to keep them linked. Talk groups provide a means to group conversations, and they can also be used to govern the routing as far as where it goes, how far it goes. That all needs to be planned and programmed into the user radios. There's a new technology that has come on really strong in the last 6 months called Grandmeister. It relaxes a lot of that in terms of having to be pre-planned. That's a good thing and that's a bad thing. But it's here to stay, so we're going to have to get used to it. If you look at a visual representation of that whole concept of TDMA, if you look at a conventional analog channel, you can see that it's 12.5 kcs wide, or an analog amateur radio can stand 25 kilocycles wide. But it's all one slide. In TDM, you actually slice that into individual slots. And those two time slots equal a 6.25K slot, even though it's still really 12.5 kilocycles wide. Recent firmware, Motorola did it about 3 years ago, so that you can actually have TDMA, you can support two talk groups even in a simplex environment. That didn't exist in the early days. So there's terminology that you'll run into as we go through this. And these are some of the terms we're going to we've got slides for each one of them. We'll kind of cruise through them fairly quickly, but you're always going to hear the people talking about these kind of terms, and so it's kind of good to get a handle on what they are so that you get a grip on what somebody is doing. Interesting. I didn't put code plugs in there. Well, code plugs is in there, but time slots is basically what we were showing about with the division by time into two different individual time slots. So two conversations can exist on the exact same frequency at the same time. So one of the neat things about TDMA is that it essentially doubles the capacity of the radio system immediately. So effectively you get two repeater systems for the price of one repeater, one antenna, one feed line, 1 amp if you're using an external antenna, but you get two time slots, which is kind of like two different frequencies and two different times. Talk groups are the way to group the users to share time slots. It's a one-to-many relationship. It doesn't distract or disrupt the others using that time slot. It should be noted that one talk group can be used at a time slot at a time. That's in terms of the conversation going on. Two conversations on two different talk groups can't exist on the same time slot. You get a busy tone if you do. And if your radio is not programmed to listen to the talk group, you will not be able to hear that talk group's traffic on your radio. Zones, the way that DMR radios, this is kind of a carryover from the professional radio systems in trunking, etc. It's just a way of grouping individual channels together. In code plugs, we use zones to group channels based upon city. So for instance, we'll have zones set up for Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Springfield, Cleveland, all of that stuff, so that as you travel, all you gotta do is change to the zone, and it gives you basically all of their talk groups of the way they do that. So that's kind of how we organize some things. Color code is kind of the digital equivalent of CTCSS or DCS. It is mandatory. You can't have DMR without it. There are 16 different color codes, CC0 through 15. Factory default is CC1. Most systems use CC1. I've seen a few that don't, but for the most part, everybody just kind of sticks with that. And it's really nothing. The primary use is more in a commercial instance. If you have close-spaced repeaters that are on the same network system, you can use different color codes to try and isolate that traffic. That's what the big goal is. Code plugs, there it is. It's simply the radio's configuration file. You use the manufacturer's programming software, you can configure the channels, the operating parameters of the radio, and that file is downloaded into the radio. You can update it and then send it back. Code plug can also contain contact lists of radio IDs, so most code plugs that you're going to see have alias lists built so that everybody's assigned that number, but it'll basically build an alias to say that number equals this person's call sign. So at least when the radio comes up, it comes up and says W8KHW, not 313911003. So you can generally find copies of code plugs around different websites. I recommend that if you're going to anybody's system, go to their system and look at their website and get their information. Pretty much any website that you go to, any of the maps, DMR Mark's website, all of the Brandmeister sites, virtually every single one of those sites that I've seen, the information for Columbus is incorrect. Drives us crazy, but what are you going to do? So go to codig.com, codig.org, we own all those domain names, but we'll list what code plugs are relevant for Columbus. The Dayton guys do the same thing. Cincinnati guys do the same thing. So if you're going or you're regularly working with somebody's repeater, go find out what they do. Go find out who the contact person is. There's a little thing on our website that says contact us. You can click that, submit some stuff.
And what's your website URL again?
Well, there's lots of them, but you can use wadig.com, you can use codig.com, codig.org, wadig.org, centralohiodigital.com, centralohiodigital.org. You know, anything that even remotely related to that, they all point to the same place. Many DMR radios, one of the things that's been a shortcoming is that they, well, not really a shortcoming. In the commercial world, you generally won't have more than 1,000 people, 1,000 employees that have radios. So the limit has been 1,000 contacts, and that's true of most of the Motorola radios. Connect Systems has a couple of model radios that actually support 65,000 contacts. That's nice, but you know, kind of narrow it down to who you're going to deal with. In our code plugs, we usually put anybody that's in Ohio in it. Roaming and beaconing. Roaming and beaconing is a feature. There's generic roaming and then there's what's called site roaming. And for instance, in this radio, I can turn on roaming and there's two talk groups programmed in here, Ohio statewide and the North America talk group, and they're set to roam. So at that point, I don't need to worry about where I go in Ohio. I can go to Dayton, Springfield, Cincinnati, any place. The radio automatically knows. It listens for a beacon that comes from the repeater, and it says, oh, look, there's somebody that's got Ohio statewide. And it basically affiliates to that repeater. So that is kind of a neat feature. I use it all the time, especially driving. You don't have to touch the radio. You don't have to sit there and say, I want to switch to the Cincinnati zone or I want to switch to this zone. I know, for instance, it was a pretty neat experiment one time when the west coast of Ohio, or the west side of Ohio, was probably the best covered for quite a while. And there was a Browns-Bengals game that you and your dad went to. His dad lives in Lima. He lives in Columbus. He drove home via 71. His dad drove home via 75. They never lost contact. They never touched their radios. It did the whole thing all by itself. And so, feature-wise, that's pretty slick. The interesting point, though, is roaming does not select the best candidate in terms of the repeater you're talking about. It selects the first one that exceeds the profile in terms of receive quality. So if you have a minimum RSSI value, receive value of 120 dB in your radio, it's going to affiliate with the closest, the first one that meets that criteria. There might be another repeater a mile away from you that has a much stronger signal, but you're not going to know that until you key it up and it doesn't make the first one. And very rarely happens, but it's something that's interesting just to know. Simplex. In the professional world, simplex is called talk around. And so basically any frequency that's programmed into your radio for repeater use, you can turn on talk around, and talk around basically sets the radio to work in simplex mode on the output frequency of the repeater. You can also program simplex frequencies and simplex channels into your radio, but amateurs typically use dedicated simplex channels, but so as not to interfere with repeater traffic. But just so that you know, if you want to either listen to the, not necessarily listen to the input, but if you want to talk to somebody and you're in short range, you can simply hit talk around and not necessarily be disturbing somebody. MIP criteria. This is a tough one. The MIP criteria are programming settings inside the radio that tell the radio how to listen for signals and how to talk to signals, or talk to the repeater. The recommended setting for repeater channels is color code free. That configures the radio to be polite to your digital system and anybody else's digital system. So you're basically saying, I don't care, since we really don't use color codes per se, by saying color code free, you're basically letting your radio talk to any of the systems. You should also configure your in-call criteria to follow the admit criteria. So in other words, if you received the signal and it came in on this color code and then this way, you want your radio to reply in that format. So these are all options that are inside the talk group. People always say to us, or say to me anyways, what do I set those things to? So we figured we'd include a slide to say this is the way we configure things. Simplex channels should be configured as always for both admit criteria and always will follow TX for the in-call criteria. That'll just mean that you'll have the least number of problems and you'll be the most respectful to other people's repeater systems and radio systems and cause the least amount of problems. Scanning is possible in DMR radios. You can configure the scanning of any kind of channels. You'll only hear traffic on that frequency and time slot in talk group if you have that programmed on some channel and that channel is in your scan list. Some folks scan both time slots on a local repeater and potentially a simplex channel. I, for instance, do that. We'll just do a simplex channel, but I'll also be monitoring some certain talk groups in both time slots, like the local ones, for instance. If you have analog channels programmed in your radio, you can include the analog channels mixed in with the digital channels. So if there's a key repeater, like in Columbus, Ohio, the 14676 machine is the weather system. So lots of time that's in a scan list so that if listening around. One thing to note is the scanning, because of the fact that your radio is very active, will decrease your battery life. Not demonstrably, but the advantages you get to digital will be somewhat mitigated because of the fact that you've got scanning turned on. There are lots of manufacturers of DMR radios. I wouldn't, even in terms of trying to prepare part of this slide, it was like, there are so many, but the big players are there. Motorola is there, Hytera is there, Tate is there, Kenwood/EF Johnson, whatever they're going to call themselves this week. Next Systems, TYT is the big oncomer in the DMR world simply because of their price point. It's a really nice quality radio for a very inexpensive price. You can't beat it.
They're in stock.
And they're in stock. Be sure to tip your waitresses and buy a radio for Fred.
They're on sale.
Motorola has their own thing called the IPSC networking protocol. It's built into every Motorola repeater. There are products that will bridge systems between Motorola and Hytera and any of the other brands. So it's really not much of an issue anymore. But for a little while, Motorola played king of the mountain. And every manufacturer includes networking now. Many of them didn't in terms of the repeaters. So it's really growing by leaps and bounds. A C-bridge is one of those devices that ties IPSC networks together. The other nice thing that a C-bridge does is it allows you to control that, the way that happens. You can set priorities to talk groups. You can time things, so if you know a particular net's going to go on a particular channel and then a particular thing, the C-bridge will actually let us schedule that to come on and automatically switch the repeater to that. So if there was an Ohio net every month or every week or whatever, and we wanted to follow that, we could actually tell the C-bridge to go in, turn that net on the repeaters at 8 p.m. on Sunday nights, whenever it might be, and turn off all the other talk groups. So it's kind of nice that, it gives you the ability to do some of that scheduling. Brandmeister is the new either king of everything or evil of the internet, whichever side you're on. There's pluses and minuses to all of these things. There's no good answer, there's no great answer. The trick is, they're both there. Figure out what works best for you and leverage it. That's the best thing I can do here. The Brandmeister has got some pretty neat technology It allows you to connect, or right now they've got Yaesu system fusion repeaters connected into it. They have Motorola repeaters connected into it. Hytera repeaters connected into it. D-Star repeaters connected into it. All kinds of the different technologies. And this is really stuff that happens in the back end to the people. The repeater owners have to deal with this more so than the individual users. But it's finally bringing that parity and that cohesiveness to all the digital formats. We don't care what you're carrying. I put the first D-Star repeater system on in Ohio, and then I put the first P25 repeater system on in Ohio. And Andy's dad looked at me and said, you know, you can keep buying these fancy repeaters, but if you're not carrying the same radio that I'm carrying, we're not going to talk to each other. And I went, oh, yeah, well, that's a very good point. So it's been 10 years of how do we get everything talking to each other. So there's lots of other digital modes. P25 is a long-standing commercial standard, very high-quality audio. Lots of manufacturers produce the radio. They are significantly more expensive than some of the stuff like Moto Turbo. They can be linked together. We have linked systems across Ohio. True mixed mode operation of digital and analog, that's one of its big strong points. You can literally have the same repeater go back and forth, and it will do it on a conversation-like basis. So it's pretty slick. NextEdge IDAS, it's a collaboration between Kenwood and ICOM. Again, those are the two main players. There are lots of other players in that realm. NextEdge, in my opinion, hands down has the best quality audio in a true 6 1/4 kilohertz frequency domain. They can be linked together, and they're primarily used right now in trunking environments commercially. DMR is a very low-cost digital radio. Think of it as Tier 1 DMR. It's kind of digital GMRS, for lack of better terms. But again, with the Chinese sources, you can buy a DPMR radio for $14 delivered to your door. Works great. It's got a lithium-ion battery in it. Yeah. So we tried to hit some of the major manufacturers, and we've got lots of radios up here, so if you want to see particular versions of them, I can show you, for instance, this is a Kenwood 5000 series. This is my new favorite radio. Because of the fact that it can support DMR, NextEdge, and P25 all in one radio. For me, that's a big thing. Color display, Kenwood audio quality, which is, usually pretty high. We've got virtually every model of Motorola radio that's up here. TYT radios. We've got a Smurf radio here. You probably won't see many of those, but that's a 900 megacycle Moto Turbo radio. It's made for the Canadian Railroad. But yeah, we call those Smurf radios. But incidentally, in Columbus, although a couple of them are having little issues right now, there's a big VHF commercial trunking system, or UHF commercial trunking system, that's gone in town. It's on top of a very high Marks tower within 4 miles of our primary receiver site, and they're less than 1 megacycle away from us. Their control channel is 1 megacycle away from our receive input, and they're doing about 400 watts on this thing. So, I don't even I just turn the analyzer on in the repeater site, no antenna or anything, and they're 50 dB over the noise floor. It's like, yeah, it's been really tough to combat. That's kind of put a lot of the DMR repeaters in Columbus into a state of flux at the moment. So the 900 repeaters off the air at the moment. But we have DMR repeaters on 900 UHF and VHF, and they're all tied together. So you can actually select talk groups that talk on just UHF only, so if you're trying to have a conversation locally. If you're try and have a conversation locally amongst people on different bands, you can select CMH Local 1, and that ties 900 UHF and VHF together, then you can go from there. Out of respect, try to keep your conversations as local as possible. Obviously, you know, when Brandmeister first started out, I remember back in like February or March, there was a time when there were 4 or 5 guys in the state of Illinois connected to Ohio statewide, all with little personal devices. They're all sitting there, they're all within 2 or 3 miles of each other, but they're having this conversation on Ohio statewide. And we finally stopped and just politely and said, you know, hey, you realize you're on Ohio statewide? And they're going, yeah, what's the deal? And I'm going, well, you're keying up like 20 repeaters in the state of Ohio. And they're going, there are repeaters connected to this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So try to keep your conversations as local as possible. If, you know, obviously if there's times when, you know, this is from our website. This is the list of our time slots and time talk groups. It also tells whether or not the talk group is on all the time, or whether it's called push to talk. Push to talk group, the C bridge allows us to control some of the things so that the talk group isn't necessarily interrupting everything. TAC 310, for instance, is connected to the Brandmeister servers all the time, so it's pretty busy. So if we turned that on full time, it would consume time slot 2 of the repeater. So basically what we can do is we can say, okay, it's there. If you want to use it, that's fine. Turn your radio to TAC 310 and key your mic. And the C bridge will turn that talk group on. It'll turn it on for 10 minutes and it'll leave it on for 10 minutes as long as there's activity going on locally on that channel. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, you shouldn't have any problem. But that's how push-to-talk groups work. There's lots of them. There's TAC 1, 310, 311, 312, UA 113, because DMR Mark didn't want to actually say it was push-to-talk. They had to come up with their own name, so they called it user accessible, or user activated. So, yeah. There are also some neat tools out there called Audio Test and Simplex, which is just there's some test talk groups to let you, there's a VU meter that's on a website in California, and you can actually go to the audio meter and you can select the 9999 talk group, go in, and you can kind of listen to your own audio come across the internet, kind of test what it sounds like. And that's probably a good place to catch up on a setting called audio. Years ago, DMR Mark, there was some problems. This is a Gen 1 Motorola radio, 6550, 6500, 4500, 4550 of the mobile version. This is a Gen 1 radio. It had audio problems. And unfortunately, Motorola was not very keen about listening to hams tell them that it had audio problems. 2 hams, one of whom is in Canada, basically shamed the daylights out of them. He went in and hacked their code plug, fixed their audio problem, and posted a little patch on how to repair your radio, how to fix your radio's audio problem. And Motorola finally had to address the issue, and finally did it. So in the last 2 versions of firmware that came out for the Gen 1 radios, the radios are fine. Mark posted this comment that the best setting that they had found to work was to disable the AGC setting in the radios. And that was true at that time. But like I said, Generation 2 radios, 7550s, any of the mobiles that are Gen 2 radios, that problem never existed. So you really want AGC on if you want the most consistent audio. TYT, Hytera, any of those radios that are out there from third party, they never had the problem. But I'll often hear hams on the air saying that even though they're using a TYT, well, I've disabled the AGC because that's what they tell you to do. Well, that's what they said, unfortunately, DMR Mark has not gone back and updated the website. If you go back and you look at their website, you look at the code plug examples they've got, it's for a Motorola XPR 6550 and an XPR 4550, the Gen 1 radios. Gen 2 radios or other brands, you really want AGC on, that's going to give you the best quality audio out there. So it's hard to convince something that's been published out there, but trust me, you'll have much better success with it. I'm trying to think, are there any questions? Sure.
What firmware version was that, the 6550 and 4550, that audio was fixed? Is that like 12 or something?
It's 1.12.15 or 17. The last two digits are 15 and 17. So as long as it's that version, no problem. Great radio, works perfect, audio sounds great.
I have a 6550, I love it. But
Yeah.
It's it's something I need to address, I think, but I think I've got mine for off, because I've had it broken for a long time.
Right. Right, and we had it that way, but when the guy in Canada fixed the audio and turned AVGC back on, the audio really improved, and you saw a demonstrable, just the quality of audio smoothing out. I mean, if you were in DMR a year and a half or 2 years ago, it would have driven you absolutely mad, because of the fact that, two users in a conversation, one guy would be at this level and the other guy would be down at this level. You'd be cranking your radio up to hear this guy, and then this guy would come booming through there, and it just drove everybody nuts. And that was the fault of that Gen 1 radio. They fixed it finally, so it's a good thing. Any other questions? You're probably
on the different talk group IDs. You had the ones that are listed on the site for your repeaters. Are those the only ones you're limited to using on a DMR radio?
Currently, yes.
On your repeater? Okay.
Those are the ones that we're supporting. We haven't made any decisions to go to connect directly to the Brandmeister yet. If I could get, I'm not going to say it won't ever happen, but until some of the politics that are going on right now settle down, it's probably not going to happen in the next 4 or 5 months anyways. I'm hoping that they'll get a lot of things settled down by the date next year. There's a lot of people trying to play king of the hill, and it's just drives me nuts. Everybody just needs to learn to get along. Some people are going to do some things different. Let them go do what they're going to do different. Some of the other things that you're going to hear about or see or talk about or find out about, I'll try to show you just some examples of them. These are what's called a DV4 Mini. Little USB device, plugs into the side of your computer. Basically turns your computer into a way to connect your radio to the backbone of the DMR network. If you're familiar with D-Star, they were called DVAPs and DV dongles at that time. So we took the same kind of concept and turned it into, for DMR, there's UHF and then there's VHF. The neat thing about these is that they'll support lots of formats. They'll support, they support DMR all along, they support D-Star, they'll support P25, they'll support NextEdge. They're a little finicky about it, but at least they were the first ones to try and address all of those things. Probably the neatest plug-and-play device for any of that has come out in the last 4 months. It's called a Shark RF Open Spot. This is a tiny little receiver transmitter device, UHF. It's got networking built in. It's got USB built in. It's got a web-based software developed, so you don't need to install software on your laptop. You simply plug it into your network, surf to it from your any laptop, iPad, iPhone, Android phone, any of that stuff. You can control it all from anything that's web browser enabled and control some of that stuff. This is a pretty neat private product. I'm hoping that they'll They say that they're going to end up supporting P25 and Next Edge, and I hope they really do, because it's probably the nicest product going right now, in my opinion. Boy, I'm not even going to remember the name of the acronym for this device. It's by Northwest Digital. Sitting on top of a Raspberry Pi. This thing's pretty cool. It's already got a high-def HD15 connector on the back of this thing. I can plug this into the back of one of the Fusion repeaters, and it turns the Fusion repeater into a D-Star Fusion DMR repeater. Pretty slick. The Fusion repeaters are actually a pretty neat box. We joke about how many of them are probably still out in boxes in the world, because lots of people bought them on the special deal that Yaesu offered. The duty cycle of the repeater is not very good, so if you run it at 20 watts, but other than that, it's actually a decent radio, it's a decent repeater, and if you can start adding flexibility with things like that, that is pretty good. There must be other slides, because
There's only one more.
oh, I'm just thinking of the fact that we didn't talk about users. Oh, so yeah, there's the digital voice system. Trying to talk about the different formats. DMR is TDMA, time domain multiplexed. So it's the 2-time slot. You can see that virtually all of these different formats use the same vocoder. Slightly different firmware in them, but it's the same vocoder. All of the repeaters that came out of, or all of the protocols that came out of the commercial market, P25, DMR, and NextEdge, IDAS, they all have forward error correction. D-Star and Fusion don't necessarily have that. They have a little bit of it, but nowhere near what the DMR and P25 are. That's why the audio sounds so much better. DMR is 12.5 kV wide with 2-time slots. P25 can go as low as 6.25, but it's generally 12.5, but it'll also run 25 kiloseconds wide for analog. D-Star, they claim it's 6.25 wide. It's actually wider than that, but it was really kind of one of the first. They and Alinco were the first 2 digital formats out there. I think Alinco has just vanished. They never caught on. Fusion's 12.5. NextEdge is 6.25 or 12.5, and that, like I said, 6.25 is the best sounding audio out there. Amateur repeaters, DMR, there's over 3,000 currently, and that's just physical repeaters. I'm not talking about hotspots, I'm not talking about PV Mega, any of the other optional devices that could be out there. P25 in the amateur world, there's probably less than 300, although there are out there and they are linking and doing some stuff. D-Star, worldwide, there's about 1,500 gateways. Again, I'm not counting any of the personal hotspot kind of repeaters that people are building. It's hard to get a number on that one because of the fact that this, it's been in flux for like the last year. Fusion, they claim that there's 800 repeaters out there, but again, how many of them are actually operating in Fusion mode rather than just analog, and how many of them are actually out of the box? I know of at least, just among my friends, I know of at least probably 10 repeaters that are still sitting brand new in the box. Never been out of the box, so. NextEdge is about 100 repeaters in the amateur world, and they're linked together, which is kind of neat. P25 has a new linking scheme that's amateur radio based. That's growing in popularity. Narrow repeaters. We actually have one that's linked that way, although we don't really advertise it that way. And yeah, there's one in Cincinnati that's linked that way. So it's growing. It should be something going through this again, it was interesting to go through some old slides. There was a presentation that was done in 2013 in Dayton for the Hamvention. When DMR was first really they were trying to get it pushed through. And I was shocked to see that as of May of 2013, they were touting the fact, they were so excited because there were almost 2,700 or 2,800 users worldwide on DMR. I can tell you that we just passed 30,000 a week or so ago. So DMR is just on this growth scale that's absolutely vertical. So it's coming on strong. And the number of repeaters is growing every day. That 3,000 figure is really based upon some of DMR Mark's information. It doesn't really count what is happening in the Brandmeister world, which is there's probably another 2,000 repeaters based on that world by itself, with all the Hyteras that are now being brought into it. Some of the fusion stuff that's being linked here. Any other questions we can answer?
I know with the DMR you can do text from one radio. Is there any plans in the future to have a store and forward type capabilities? Where
You know, I haven't seen anybody talk about store and forward. Lots of people don't even, if you're on the DMR Mark network, you're supposed to disable all of that. Luckily you can control it per talk group, so you know, you can add some of that stuff. We've experimented with it. One of the other neat things that we've kind of tried to experiment with, but you know, we haven't had much time to do with it. The Motorola radios support, I think, that basically is a radio management feature. And so Andy and I keep, you know, claiming that, well, we're swearing that we'll take time and play with this, but we just haven't had time to. But the cool thing is that we can actually reprogram the radios over the air. So the whole concept would be if we made a change to the repeater system, this primarily happens in the 900 band, or will happen in the 900 band. It would be the matter of you take your radio, stick it in the charger, just leave it turned on that night, and that night we'll come by and update your radio with the new talk groups, the new code plug, all that stuff. You don't touch your radio. You don't have to if you don't want to. So, that would be a neat feature to see it used more often. Text messaging, I think, would be huge, especially in terms of emergency communications. It's just incredibly efficient. It only takes a moment to get that message through. You can have tons of pre-canned messages, both in the mobiles and in the, and if you're using a particular piece of software that does, basically provides a console interface like professional dispatchers use, you can have canned messages, and it's much easier to type via computer. You can select groups of users or individual users and burst that out. Nobody knows it if it happens. It's great. It's neat stuff.
We've used it on a couple of occasions up in the Mansfield area during drills and that type of thing. It works well.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate. You know, people always talk about the fact that, you know, how do you alert people to things going on? I dearly loved pagers, and I'm so sorry to see those go away. Only because it was a one-way device. My wife knew I got the message, but I didn't have to interrupt my day to say, okay, I'll get the milk. It was, hey, we need milk. Okay, I'll deal with it, you know. But in terms of emergency communications, we've taken the same kind of concept, and on analog repeaters here in Columbus, some of the repeater owners don't know that it happens because we'll inhibit their PL or use a different PL, but we'll burst data out and can send messages via text messages. So to me, in terms of alerting users for emergency communications, that has huge benefits. And the pagers are dirt cheap. I mean, you can buy pagers off of eBay for 25 to 50 bucks, and you know, they take a AA or a AAA battery, last for weeks, and you know, you don't have to worry about it. So, and it's much like what you're talking about in terms of store and forward. It receives the text. You don't necessarily have to be there to read it. When you pick the pager up later, the text is there, and you can say, "Oh, crap! Tornado came through a half hour ago." I probably had to go see if my house was still in. So,
Pictures are in the house.
yep. They're available on all bands. So, what do you guys see happening? What interests you about DMR?
one thing that's interesting to us is Ashland, the local hospital, just got bought up by university hospitals, and they're wanting some sort of independent communications link to their other hospitals in that,
Which universities?
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Interestingly enough, on a side note, in 2009 and 2010, all of the Columbus area hospitals got D-Star radios. Every single one of them. They never have used them in the digital mode. Never. 50% of the programming information in the radios is incorrect. They've got repeaters that aren't even on the air anymore. It's, you know, so it's a constant thing you gotta keep up with. But why they won't try those technologies, I remember when Lucas County did a drill. And Lucas County finally decided they did their analog drill, they did everything else, but the guys in Cleveland convinced them to try D-Star at the end of that drill. And they went nuts. They said, my God, we just talked to Mansfield. My God, we just talked to Delaware. We just talked to these people. And it's like, you mean we could do this on a regular basis? Yeah. So, digital has a lot to offer. Luckily, TYT's putting a radio in the price point that most hams can't. It's hard not to say, okay, well, you know, sure, when a D-Star radio was $1,000, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow. But what was TYT, 130 bucks?
Yeah, 119.
Yeah.
30, right in that area.
Yeah, I mean, that's really reasonable.
Yeah.
And it works well. And they update the firmware and they update the software. So they keep up with stuff. Sure.
Your previous slide on your talk groups,
Uh-huh.
I like how you guys organize your talk groups on the website. I think that's easy for me, it's just my personal opinion.
I don't
Compared to how
care
you
for the
used
color.
to do it. Well, it's just laid out, it's laid out clean. But my question is, I have two questions. Do you
Sure.
guys move talk groups in and out based on usage, like you might, you know, I don't have a comparison from maybe a year or two ago, but, you know, if you find a talk group's getting a lot of usage, would you move that from a push to talk to a on all the time? Do you guys make a determination?
We make a lot of those decisions based upon user input.
Okay,
So if people are using the machine and they're saying, gosh, I really wish,
yeah,
you know, this was on full time because of this is going on, we will always take that kind of stuff into consideration.
okay,
And we'll usually, we don't have, how do I say this? We created CODIG, there are no dues, no meetings, no politics, no. 4 times a year, we'll generally have a pizza get-together or a food get-together, and everybody brings the latest gizmo that they've bought and kind of shows everybody else what they're doing with it. And so people who are experimenting, it's a great thing. And anybody's generally welcome, but we have not organized some of the things like a mailing list and that kind of thing. We really need to do that, just to get that information out better. But you're more than welcome to use the contact thing. We keep track of that stuff. We'll open a conversation and we'll, you know, pass it around to other users saying, you know, I'm getting a user that's requesting this talk group to be on all the time, or would like us to add this talk group because of, you know, there's activity going on.
okay, then my last question, I appreciate the info. Your new talk group, 99 for talk around, obviously I don't have that, I need to program that, but are you really?
It's not used much.
Yeah.
We used it
You really
in-
want us using that? You want your users using that? Because if we're using the output of the repeater? Yeah, that confused me too. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding how it functions. Is it not gonna?
No, that's what it does.
The frequency, but it doesn't tie up.
It doesn't necessarily tie up the repeater. It ties up the output frequency if you were near somebody else.
Yeah.
So,
The primary purpose would be for use when you're not in range of the repeater, so.
Or the
it would be an
previous.
interference issue.
So,
right.
yeah.
We used it at Dayton really heavily one year.
Was that, yeah, that's what I was actually getting to. This past year, you guys had a separate, there was a separate simplex with coming, you know, all set. I set that up, ready to go, and I actually hit you guys at Dayton. I just called out and a couple of you guys answered, you know, and it was great. I don't recall, I guess maybe that was the output, I didn't realize it, I don't think it was.
Yeah, it was.
Was
It
it?
was.
Okay. So that's what that was, okay.
Yeah, so it was just our simple way of dealing with, every year we sit down and we say, what are we gonna do at date?
I just thought maybe, is there, if you look around the internet, so maybe 2 or 3 kind of agreed upon DMR
Yeah.
simplex reuse?
Actually, we can show you that.
Is that maybe something you guys could add to your site, or whatever your opinion is on that, I just, you know, as opposed to.
We probably should go away from talk group ID 99 and go to the standard frequency and the standard ID.
Talk about 99 is the
It's-
standard.
that's
for
a
the
standard.
simplex.
Yeah.
I mean, just if there was the simplex frequency, I just wouldn't want to interfere with somebody else, in my opinion. You know?
Right.
That's what I want. And not realize it.
Yeah, there's actually another one besides 446-500 and 446-0750.
The problem with having 4 simplex frequencies is which one do you listen to, right?
Yeah.
I scan them, but,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
That brings up another question, and just trying to learn the functions of the radio. If you had 4 frequencies you want to listen to, is that what the purpose of those receive groups
Yeah.
are?
Actually, receive groups are more for talk groups. They group talk groups. Scan is what really does frequencies. In the early days, because of the fact that there weren't many conversations going on, he brings up an interesting point. There's a thing a feature in the radios called RX groups, receive groups. And basically, what you can do is take different talk groups from the same time slot and put them in a receive group, and then basically assign in every one of your channels, for every one of those talk groups, you can say, use this receive group, CMHC. So if a conversation, if you're listening to or you're talking on the local repeater and something happens on Ohio statewide, for instance, in one of our default code plugs, the Ohio conversation will come through. In the days when there wasn't a lot of traffic, that was a fine thing. Today, that's probably not such a good thing. Only because Ohio statewide, A, is increased its traffic dramatically, and B, in terms of the C bridge, it's set for a priority in terms of talk group. We originally saw it was originally called Ohio Statewide Tactical. They dropped, when we moved it to what's called the North American Talk Group servers, they dropped the word tactical off of it, called it Ohio Statewide. That talk group originated here in Columbus. It was originally hosted by us. It's kind of evolved, but the original concept would have been for emergency communication if word needed to get out to a broadcast kind of environment, having that available. It's kind of changed or morphed into some other things, and hopefully it will remain in terms of, in the event of an emergency, people will recognize the value of something that talks statewide and not tie it up with something that's going on locally. Because I see a scenario where tornadoes would come through and a tornado would hit Dayton and a tornado might hit Delaware. Well, in my opinion, Columbus and Delaware and everything else should focus in a group to have communication to keep emergency comms going on. Same thing over in Dayton, but we wouldn't necessarily tie up Ohio statewide. We should take Ohio statewide and get that information back to Scott and get that information back to the Ohio DMA, so that if there's information they need to have, that resource is available to them. But really try to focus, it's really going to be a coordination effort now as this has grown, and it's finally grown to the point where it's got enough user penetration and it's got enough people available. We need to start having some really good strategic conversations about how does the local deal with some things, and how does Franklin County and its surrounding counties, for instance, deal with some of the stuff? How would, same thing happen in the Dayton or Southwest Ohio area happen? What would happen up in Mansfield? What would happen?
Kevin, this might be a good place to put on the time slots and why certain things are up on time slot 1 versus time slot 2.
Well, and in the past, because of the DMR mark structure, what they wanted was a very, very stable network that existed for their key talk groups, which was the North American talk group, the Midwest talk group, the worldwide talk group and everything else, all that stuff is pretty much stick to one time slot and everything, time slot 1, and everything else local and beyond went to time slot 2. Brandmeister is changing that thought process dramatically, which is what's causing part of the friction that's going on. Because DMR Mark would really like to see that nice stable environment. But now suddenly there's all these other talk groups showing up on time slot 1. They need to relax, everybody else needs to relax, but there really needs to be some organization for that and some thinking applied to it. And time slot 1 might be a perfect place to put some of the MCOM stuff and say, you know, we might take Ohio statewide, put it on both time slots and say if it's on time slot 1, it's emergency. If it's time slot 2, it's what you're gonna do. But trying to get, there's at least 6 different groups with sea bridges, connections and everything else in the state of Ohio, between the Toledo area, the Cleveland area, Columbus area, Cincinnati, Dayton. There's 3 groups that feed talk group information in the just Cincinnati and Dayton area. So trying to get all of those people to agree on something is gonna be kind of a trick.
Well, and then you also have the Kentucky group that's also feeding into the Cincinnati area as well.
Right.
So, and of course we have our fellow amateurs over in Indiana who we're still trying to bring them along into allowing us, even though we're in Ohio, to use their repeater system on an income basis, if nothing else. And they've kind of refused that idea, at least to this point. So hopefully, I hope it never has to come down to, you know, we have some major disaster before somebody wakes up, but
Right.
it comes down to, you know, just that fact. Now, we are working with, Michigan is almost exclusively D-Star. So we've been working with the...
Well, there's a huge DMR network up there now.
Yeah, and it's growing, but the biggest backbone part of their system is D-Star.
Right, especially
And-
for MCOM.
Yeah, and so what we're trying to do is safely bring D-Star down into Ohio with a sea bridge, so that when needed, because let's face it, tornadoes do not look at borders. They just do whatever they want to do. So when we need that communication back and forth, we have that, and it's available to us. Unfortunately, I can't seem to get guys to think forward on this. They're looking at, well, when it happens, we'll talk about it. It's like, well, when it happens, it's too late.
Right,
You're
that's the
talking
key,
about it
is
now.
can we have that conversation early enough that we have
Yeah.
some agreed upon in the event of an emergency? I mean, there's very simple things in Columbus. For instance, people know that the 14676 machine is owned by the Central Ohio Repeater Club, but in the event of severe weather, it's the home of the Central Ohio Severe Weather Network.
Right.
But if that machine goes down, where do they go? They have that pre-designated, but let's make sure that everybody sees this list of, and
Yeah.
Coeries, you know, for the life of me, God love them, but they have 4 repeaters. And then FL Digi is a great format, it's a great way to be able to send emergency communication forms and things like that. It's a great tool. But why does everything have to be on the same repeater? Why do you stop all the voice traffic so that you can send this digital message? You got 3 other repeaters! So, it's finally getting settled. But
Yeah.
for a long time, for 30 years, they had 4 repeaters on here. So, like Scott's saying, the whole thing is, can we have some conversations that, we're not saying we want to take over this stuff on a permanent basis. It's just, can we have an agreement that in the event of something happening?
And it's just like, you have to test the system on a regular basis to know, okay, if you have a hang up someplace, something unusual happens, you can find out easily and without a whole lot of interruption to our community service if we do it on a test basis, just like we do with the statewide net, every other Wednesday. We're testing the system statewide. Okay, it's not to prove how many people we can make contact with, but it is to show the system is working from Cleveland to Cincinnati to Toledo to Youngstown to Marietta to wherever. And we know we have that system when we need it. It's another tool in that toolbox. It's not replacing anything. It's just an addition to. And it is a great little tool if we can get it all working well and prove it out on a regular basis so that we know we have that confidence level built into it.
Well, there's been some recent successes
There-
with that kind of stuff.
there
I mean,
has.
DMR being as new as it was this summer when there were 3 major events in the state of Ohio. The Republican National Convention in Cleveland, the NAACP convention in Cincinnati, and the Toledo Air Show. Well, there was some concern from the state of Ohio that what if something happened? What if some tragic event did happen? Could there be some emergency communication? MCOM got involved, Aries got involved, they set up situations where, and to make matters worse, the Emergency Management Agency here in Columbus, the Ohio Highway Patrol is remodeling the entire building, so the inside of that building is gutted. They had nothing.
We just got our AC plugs in.
Yeah, so it was a matter of, can we set radios up outside in a trailer, which we did, and got the stuff connected, but we had both an analog backhaul between those cities, and we had a digital backhaul between those cities. So having that ability, and it's not, did we take over anything? Did we, tell somebody that, you can't use your repeater anymore, we need it? No, it was just a matter of, we had this prearranged, is it okay if we test this, and everybody said, yeah, that's fine. So for 30 minutes a day, things were in use. But it proved a point.
It worked very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
It worked excellent. I
Yes.
mean, it was interesting to pick up the radio and talk to Cleveland, and it's like sitting here next to this gentleman, we're just talking back and forth. We did it several times a day, and the same way Cincinnati came through. I mean, it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep.
And all because we agreed we'd try it. And we had that gentleman's agreement, if you will,
Coffee pot.
that said, hey, we're willing to give something new a try. And that's what really is stemming my drive with all of this. Not to replace or take over anything, just merely it's another tool in the toolbox. And if we can build those tools up, we have a heck of an interconnect system that will rival none.
And I'm going to throw another plug in here and say, support your local dealers.
Right, exactly.
Because without them, if you didn't have a place where you could go down to a showroom and see the thing, and yeah, 9 times out of 10, I can probably find a radio on the internet for $20 less, $10 less, or anything else. But the bottom line is, I don't have to deal with the state of Ohio for sales tax or use tax or anything else, and I keep my local dealer in business.
That's right.
Used to cats.
Appreciate that.
They're another important resource.
Absolutely.
We lost AES in Cleveland, and I sure wouldn't want to see that happen anyplace else. Certainly not here. This is much too valuable a resource.
Exactly.
I can't tell you how many times I need some stupid ass little connector. Like, come out here, he's got pins of them. There it is.
That's it, exactly. You got it.
You don't have to drive 150 miles to
Right.
Deere's store.
And I can hold it in my hand and try it.
Yes, yes.
And they've done some really great events this year with an ICOM day, a Yaesu day, gave people a chance to come out and see some of the newer stuff. I ended up buying another D-Star radio. God only knows how many, but I came back and I thought, wow, this new 5100 is really cool. I used that because, of course, getting older, it's got the big print vision. So I can actually read that radio. Oh, yeah. Hate to say that, but man, something that simple, it's that true. And they've really improved that interface dramatically over the years. So.
Well, I appreciate that and appreciate your presentation. That you hopefully stick around for one-on-one questions. For
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll be here. We'll show you, answer questions, do anything up. If you need radios program, we can do some of that stuff. Potentially. Just so that you know, this is bag 1 of 2. This is nothing but programming cables for radios.
I would remind you folks, we have some lunch stuff in the hall. I'd like you to partake in that, and we still have some hourly drawings and some other things going on. So
I won.
And also, Josh, who most of you know, is probably our best guy on digital here. So if you do have a question, and Eric and I are trying to learn as well, but Josh is probably our best. So if you have a question, you can call him or visit him. I think in most cases he's going to be able to answer it for you. So again, appreciate your efforts and stick around if you have more questions or just want to grab a sandwich.
Thanks for coming.